Okay, so welcome everyone to this back to school webinar. Uh, Today we will be, or our beautiful presenter Trish Jonker will be talking about how to beat back to school stress. And just before I go on to introductions and before Trish starts the webinar, a few housekeeping items. So we will have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that come up during the presentation, please feel free to share them at the Q&A box that you will see on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to also use the chat to comment or share your feelings or thoughts, or even ask any questions that pop up during the presentation. And also, we will be recording this webinar, and the recording will be shared with all the participants later. So you can go back to these tips and tricks that Trish shares today. And a few words about Trish. So Trish is coming to us from Chicago area. She's a clinical therapist and a team lead here at Meru Health. She has been providing therapy to children and their families for almost 20 years, but that's not all. She has also been a foster parent for the past 10 years for children now aged 10 to 25 years old. So she has a lot of wisdom to share from this area on how to handle and manage back to school stress. And just a quick note that this information is not intended or implied to be a substitute for professional advice. It is provided for educational purposes only, so always consider seeking the advice of your physician before starting any new treatments. With these words, I will pass it on to Trish. Enjoy the webinar.
Great. Thank you so much. It is wonderful to be here and to join you all today. As she mentioned, my name is Trish Jonker, and I am one of the team members over at Meru Health, and happy to meet with you all today. So today we are really talking about that back to school stress and how to be well in a year that has really been like no other. I feel like especially the past few years, every year has just felt so different with its own unique stresses. And this year is one of those as well. So in today's webinar, we are going to go over a few things. We're going to talk about some warning signs and really like what to look for in terms of if someone that you love or care for is struggling with some mental health symptoms. And then I'm going to get really specific and practical, and we're going to talk about some interventions, some strategies, some things you could even start doing tonight in your house that would help really improve everybody's mood and functioning and kind of help us all as we're going through this unique back to school experience this year. So I always encourage people, when you come to my webinars, feel free to grab a device or pen and paper, something where you can take some notes, because I am actually going to really challenge you to pick one of the strategies that I mentioned today and see if you can start implementing them in your home this week in order to really make a difference. So why is it a year like no other? Well, I grabbed a couple of statistics, and really the first one mentions that we've had a huge number of resignations and retirements that have happened during the first 2 years of the COVID pandemic. The Wall Street Journal reported that about 300,000 people left their jobs in the educational field during those first 2 years. And so what's happened is, for those that remain, 78% of teachers are now experiencing symptoms of stress and depression. They have, higher workloads. They are, trying to desperately recruit new staff. They are lowering standards in many districts in order to recruit new staff. And all of that kind of an atmosphere in our public school system has increased the symptoms of stress and depression among our teachers. And I would probably also say, all the other professionals that are involved in our educational system, I'm sure as well. Also, then kind of at the same time, the majority of parents surveyed have now said that they feel like their children's education is suffering due to these school staffing shortages. So not only do we have these teachers and public school professionals that are experiencing this stress and depression, but we also have that ripple effect where parents are now anxious. I think we were anxious during COVID because we felt like our children's education was struggling. And now that we even feel like we're getting back to a bit more normalcy that way, we actually now feel like our children's education is still not where it could be because of these staffing shortages. And then additionally, especially in 2022, what we've noticed in research is that parents are heading into this new school year with some significant anxiety about their child's safety, having safety concerns about what's going on in the school system when it comes to gun violence. I've spoken with children who are anxious about going back to school because they're afraid of a gun incident happening at their school. There's lots of conversations in different districts about what kind of safety measures they want to implement. And of course, all of us have different opinions about our views on gun control. But it gets really complicated when you involve a school and what kind of gun control you want around a school system. Do we want kindergarten teachers having guns in the classroom? And that conversation just makes us all feel incredibly stressed and anxious, and it's just amped all of that up for us. And so that's where I really feel like this is a back to school season like we've never had before. So as we get started, I just want to take a little poll and kind of find out who you are, who we've got in the room today. And so for this poll that you've seen has popped up, just click for me if you are a school professional, if you are a parent or caregiver, or if you are actually both of those things. And so we'll just give you a minute to enter that poll, and then we will see the results. Are we ready, Maya? There we go. Let's see. I can't see the results. Do you have them, Maya?
Yes. So it looks like everybody here is a parent or a caregiver.
Okay. All right. So a lot of parents and caregivers, that, as you know, from my story as well, I am a foster parent. And so we can kind of commiserate together in terms of our stresses and struggles as we head into this school year. So even in the best of times, teaching and parenting are high stress endeavors. If you were parenting and had kids in school 5 years ago, it was a high stress endeavor. Safeguarding the physical and emotional health of our children while trying to care for ourselves can overwhelm anyone. And now we are clearly not in the best of times. And so to get through them, what we are all trying to figure out is how to do more with less. More kids with fewer teachers, more mental health needs with less time. And I would even add more mental health needs with less professionals. What we've really noticed in the mental health profession is many of us have full caseloads. People in private practice are establishing wait lists. It's tough to get in to see a mental health professional just because of the increased, specifically anxiety, depression, burnout, and stress that we've seen over this past year. So like I mentioned, we're going to start with some warning signs. And so we're going to start with kind of some little kiddos. So if you've got any little ones in your house, kind of up to age 8, these are 5 particular warning signs that I would encourage you to look for. If you only see one of these, maybe not as big of a deal, but if you see 2 or more of these, I would really encourage you to maybe take notice that there might be some mental health, emotional struggles going on in your home. And again, if there are any teachers that are joining now in your classrooms. So the first one is hyperactivity. And in the families that I work with, I see a lot of families that will assume it's ADHD. Anytime they see anything above that typical child excitement, they will assume it's ADHD, and they'll want to go to their primary care physician and talk about getting medication for ADHD. But when you're seeing this kind of hyperactive behavior that causes disruptions in social settings, especially if it's happening in multiple settings, it happens at school, it happens at home, it happens at your place of worship, it happens on the sports team, whatever. It could be ADHD, absolutely, but it also could be anxiety. And so keeping your mind open and looking for other kinds of warning signs that might be happening. Because even in yourself as an adult, we know that when we tend to get anxious, we tend to get a little bit more jittery. We tend to get a little bit more clumsy. We don't have as good of a memory. And that can happen in our children as well and look like hyperactivity. The second one I'd have you look for is sleep issues. So if your child is having persistent nightmares, they're happening regularly, or if your child is taking longer than 30 minutes to fall asleep. If it takes a little bit, you've got to read a couple of books, you need some wind down time, that's understandable. But if they're in bed and settled and they're tired, but they're tossing and turning for 30 minutes or longer, that's definitely something that you want to just note in your mind, that something's going on, that they're not exactly able to rest. Their body is at a place of unrest. The third one would be excessive fear, worry, or crying. And this is the kind that's difficult to console, or the kind that happens frequently. And so again, it's that excessive kind of fear, worries, cries. And again, one of the reasons I put this on here is it's not the kind that happens the first week of school, but now, maybe you've been in school for a bit and it's still kind of happening. It's not settling. And then extreme disobedience or extreme aggression. Many of our little ones will have temper tantrums. Sometimes they get aggressive, sometimes they're disobedient. But we're talking about temper tantrums that are happening most days of the week. So we're talking about 4 days a week, 5 days a week, you're having these kinds of extreme temper tantrums. That might be something that you want to pay attention to, because again, they're not feeling safe. They're not feeling comfortable. They're feeling distressed, and it's causing this kind of a reaction. And then the persistent difficulty separating from you as their parent, not just the first day or the first couple of days of school, but heading into the end of September, you're still experiencing some difficulty separating. There might be some anxiety there that you'd want to pay attention to and get some help. So again, these are some warning signs just to kind of note for yourself to see if this is something you might want to watch for or seek out some additional support for. And then in some older children, and as we get into adolescence, I've got a few more here. Some of them are similar, but of course will look different as our children get older. So again, that excessive sadness and worry would be concerning. Of course, teenagers are moody, so it's fine if we've got a bit of sadness that's happening occasionally. But again, we're looking at most days of the week. They have a good day here and there, but like 4 to 5 days a week, you're really noticing some excessive sadness or some excessive worrying. And again, that extreme hyperactivity, the kind that's making social situations difficult for them, that's occurring in multiple situations that they are in, multiple environments. And then also could be ADHD. You'd definitely want to get a rule out on that, but also be open to the fact that in light of the current climate, it could be based in anxiety, and that's what's causing them to be a little bit more agitated. And then looking at their school performance and how they're doing with concentration. This one, for many of us is tough because our kids have struggled with school performance over the past few years, with bouncing in different types of learning styles, hybrid or asynchronistic or in person or virtual or whatever. And maybe there has been some fluctuation in their school performance. But what does your gut tell you? You know your child the best. And if you feel like, no, you know what, there's been a significant change and they're not performing at the academic level that I know they're capable of. And I think it's because they are stressed, they are anxious, they are depressed, they are burnt out. Something's going on emotionally for them. The fourth one is a loss of interest in things they used to enjoy. So we're looking at did they used to have a hobby they used to really like? Did they used to have a group of friends and they used to want to go out regularly? Did they have a sport they used to follow? And now it's just kind of dropped. And it's not that it's dropped and transitioned, because we know that our older kids do tend to have different interests, and over their life, they tend to ebb and flow, where they like anime and then they like skateboarding and then they like baseball. That's normal. But we're talking about a drop where there's actually nothing really replacing it and they're just more kind of blah. That would be a bit of a warning sign that you'd want to pay attention to. And then the physical tension. Do you have a kiddo who is struggling with some physical complaints on a regular basis, an increase in stomach aches or GI issues? That's often indicative that they're having some muscular tension in their abdomen, and that can be a result of stress or anxiety. And so they may end up with more GI issues or stomach aches because everything's tight and they're not able to digest their food properly. If you're like me, I hold my tension up in here, right in the back of my neck. And so for me, my muscles will get tense or I'll get headaches. And if you are having any of your older kids complaining of headaches, of course, you might want to have things checked out medically, see your primary care physician for these things, but also just wonder, could it be something related to stress? And then a change in appetite. Of course, again, if you've parented teenagers, as I have been consistently for the past 10 years, their appetites can increase significantly. But we're looking here, does your gut tell you that they're eating because they're going through a growth spurt, or are they eating because it's emotional eating? It's stress-based eating. It's more kind of that eating because they're just filling something emotionally. Or skipping meals. Are they just so lethargic they just don't even have an appetite? So kind of be really mindful and intentional and notice what is going on with their eating. I've noticed a change, what's happening there. Also with their sleeping patterns, again, can be a tough one with our older kids, especially if they have to get up early for school. They may not be getting the sleep they need, so they might be sleeping a lot later on the weekends or taking naps. But we're looking for sudden and pronounced changes in their sleeping patterns. And then, for example, on a Saturday, it would be very normal for a teenager to sleep in on a Saturday morning to kind of catch up from their lack of sleep during the week. But are they sleeping like all day on a Saturday? Is it to a point where it's more than your other teenagers that and then finally, persistent irritability, which if you have a teenager, maybe you're laughing at home right now, but what normal irritability in a teenager is kind of like beyond the typical eye roll, beyond, you as an authority figure, but they're actually just persistently irritable about life. And they just kind of have a negative filter on the world, frequent expecting disappointment, just that kind of a mindset. And so if you've got 2 or more of these that you're seeing, I would probably really encourage you to just pay attention to this. And as we go further, think through, what do I want to do to better support this older child or adolescent that's in your home? So when we think through these things, what I want to encourage you is to actually also then reflect on yourself, because there are some research studies that show that for in homes where the parent is struggling with anxiety, the children are much more likely to demonstrate symptoms of anxiety. And so what we need to do as parents in the home is we need to make sure that our number one priority is actually watching our own mental health. Because when we as parents are stable and peaceful and calm, and when we can be an anchor for them and a safe foundation for them, their mental health will automatically respond to that and their mental health will improve. So it's not that we don't want to attend to them, of course we do, but also really prioritizing our own mental health, which is something that sometimes we forget to do, if I'm being honest. So let's take a look at some warning signs actually for you. And what I would say is, first of all, feeling anxious about a number of topics and not being able to control the worry. Is that something that you have felt in the last few weeks? Being so restless that you find it hard to sit still. Have you noticed in yourself more of that persistent irritability? Are you easily annoyed? Are you struggling to be patient, kind, those types of things? That question about interest, does that bring up a red flag for you? Have you noticed that you've actually dropped off with having interest in hanging out with your friends or doing things that you used to really enjoy? Any feelings in yourself of feeling down, depressed, or hopeless, any sleep troubles for yourself, trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too much, which then also relates to that having little energy. Are you finding that you're oversleeping, you're fatigued, you're not really having that spark that you maybe have had in years past? Watching yourself in terms of your appetite, is your appetite something that you're struggling with? Are you finding that you are emotionally eating? Or are you so stressed and pushing yourself so hard that you're skipping meals, you're forgetting to eat? I would also add, drinking water. And then again, with your mood, are you feeling bad about yourself? Any self-esteem struggles? And then thinking through your own work performance, any difficulties with concentrating, focusing, any concerns raised by yourself or anyone else that you work with that maybe your performance is kind of lacking because you just don't have it right now. So I'm really going to ask you to look at yourself and how you are doing during this year like no other, and how you are focusing and functioning. And if you are checking, 2 or more of these, it might be important for you to make some changes so that you can lead your home and create a safe, comfortable place for your family. So here we go with some of these practical strategies that I told you I was going to mention. And these first ones really talk about communication. And what I would encourage you to do, and again, I'm going to ask you to pick one. I'm going to give you a whole list of strategies. These are the first ones. The first one is about communication with each other, between parents and between teachers. So parents, and you might be surprised by my first bullet point, but the first thing I'm going to suggest is that you extend gratitude to your school team. You probably weren't expecting that one. But basically, what a lot of research has shown is that when we extend gratitude to others, it actually improves our own mental health. The simple action of writing a note, sending an email, purely out of the intention of extending gratitude, actually improves our own mental health. And so what I would encourage you to do is take some time this week, pick someone that's involved in your child's school system, and extend gratitude to them in person or in writing for what they are doing. It will improve your own mental health. It will also, by ripple effect, obviously really improve their mental health. A recent study showed that the number one need that school professionals feel right now is they want to be appreciated. That's the number one thing that they want. So if you can do that for them, it will boost their mental health, which is going to help them run their classroom better, right? So it's going to have a ripple effect there. The other piece on intentional communication is staying in touch regarding your child's emotional health. Maybe you've never had to do this before. Maybe your child has always been fine and you haven't had any issues. But if you're noticing, as we went through those warning signs, that you hit a couple of those for your child, this week is the time to really reach out to the school and say, hey, I'm noticing that we have a couple of issues here. My child is struggling with these things. And you might not have noticed because it's sleep and whatever, but I want you to know they're just really not doing well. And how can we partner together to ensure that my child is feeling a little bit more stable and secure and can be successful at school? Most school districts will be fantastic with you in terms of getting back to you, talking about some needed supports, especially if you're working with them and being grateful for all they're already doing, but kind of brainstorming together about what are some needed supports. As a parent who's had a couple of children that have had individual education plans, I can tell you that those plans are generally updated on a regular schedule. But if at any time you feel like there have been significant changes in your child's emotional health, you have the right to ask for a review of their IEP. Or if you feel like your child needs a 504 plan or an IEP to kind of get things started where they would get more emotional and behavioral support at school, you can start that process at any time. You don't have to wait for these annual review seasons. So reach out to them and just say, hey, I'm wondering, maybe you have an idea of what they could do, or maybe you don't have an idea, but you're like, hey, my kiddo is struggling in this way. What do you think we can do to better support them? In terms of teachers, if there are any teachers that have jumped on the call, I would really encourage you, if you're not already doing any social emotional learning, this is a year where we absolutely need to be incorporating social emotional learning in our programs. A 5-minute morning meeting where we do an emotional check-in, some mindfulness practices throughout the week. We know that if children feel loved and they have a sense of belonging in the classroom, research shows they are more likely to be successful in terms of their educational performance. So starting off at the beginning of the school year with a real sense of belonging and community, taking time to look students in the eye and warmly ask them how they're doing on a regular basis can make a huge difference in their success. And then parents, in terms of being intentional about your communication with your children, Asking open-ended questions. I mean, if you're anything like me, I for sure have gotten into these like habits where I get the kids home from school at the end of the day and I'll say, how was school? And they'll say boring. And I'll say, what did you do? And they'll say nothing. And it's like, if that's all the questions I'm asking, like, I know it's not true. I'm not getting any information. We're not connecting. They're not feeling loved. They're not feeling seen. And maybe I'm too busy to think up an additional question and it just kind of falls flat. And so what I would say is that right now in this season, as we're heading into this new school year, to really think about some open-ended questions that you want to start asking your children. And maybe you've got a Monday question, a Tuesday question, a Wednesday question. You've got it on a little Post-it note for yourself in the kitchen. But asking, and you can Google these, there's a million of these online, but things like, who did you see being kind today? Yesterday, as I was giving my kiddos snacks when they came home from school, I said, can someone tell me a story of something that happened at school today that would make me smile? And so one of them told me a funny story of something that happened at school today. But asking more open-ended questions, again, in order to increase that sense of connection and belonging, can actually help the whole mood of the house instead of it was boring, I did nothing kind of check in. If you're having trouble with some of these intentional communication moments, especially with older kids, I have found that asking while you're side by side to each other can sometimes be more helpful than that direct face-to-face eye contact, kind of more intense conversation. And so with older kids and with some younger kids as well, it can be helpful to do it when you're actually side by side. So for example, going on a walk together or when you're driving in the car together, choosing those moments. Maybe you don't do the open-ended questions at more direct moments, but you're doing it maybe when you walk the dog together or you're driving them over to their friend's house and just saying, hey, blah, 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 open-ended question, who did you see being kind today or something like that. The other piece is being really intentional about your communication in the house. So kind of this week, just really be mindful and notice, how many times am I complaining in front of the kids? And how many times am I modeling gratitude in front of the children? And so, it's kind of what I started off this slide with, when we extend gratitude, when we are living a life of gratitude, when we practice, a gratitude journal, or, there's some apps that help us practice gratitude, it absolutely boosts our mood. There's a lot of research behind this. And so just modeling that in your home and changing the energy of your house. So there's less complaining, there's less talking about your worries, but more about what's going right, what's going well, how beautiful of a day it was, some positive moments that you've had throughout the day and making that kind of the conversation around the dinner table. Secondly, being really intentional in your mind. And I'm assuming that most of you have heard of the word mindfulness before. It's been kind of a catchphrase for about 10 years now. A lot of people it's become quite popular is what I mean. And so, really taking a time and saying, this is a year like no other. This is a year where I am experiencing anxiety, depression, burnout, stress, any of those kinds of emotions, and choosing to be intentional about where you place your thoughts. So with mindfulness, one thing we notice is that we want to anchor our thoughts in the present moment and keeping it calmly anchored in the present moment. And sometimes with our anxieties or a depression, we can get caught in other dimensions. We can get caught in the past, and you find yourself spinning about things in the past, spinning about the story that you saw on TikTok last night, spinning about the news story you saw this morning on the Today Show, whatever it is. You're kind of just ruminating and spinning about things. You might have regrets about the way that you spoke to your partner or something that's happening to you, and it's all kind of spinning from the past. Other times you might find you're caught in the future. You're catastrophizing how everything could go wrong. You're imagining all the terrible what if scenarios of the future. And you're really living your life kind of in these hypotheticals that haven't even occurred yet. And so what we want to do is just capture those thoughts and anchor them back in the present moment. And you may have had ways that you've tried to practice this previously. A really easy way that you can do today, even when you're at work or with your family, is just saying, wait a second, stopping yourself and saying, wait a second, I am not in the present moment right now. I am fully locked into the past or the future, and I'm not actually here in the present. So you're going to run through all 5 of your senses. So you're going to go, what do I see right now? and you're going to stop for a moment and look around the room, pick colors, pick items, label things that you see. What do I smell right now? You're just going to take a moment and take a nice deep breath and think about what you smell, what you hear. Think for yourself, what do I hear right now? Running through all of your senses. And what that does, it's actually going to capture you in the present moment and your current sensory experience, and it will decrease those distracting thoughts that are causing you to feel worse. Another one is when you notice those what ifs coming to you, those worst case scenarios that you're starting to spin about. First, you want to notice them. There they are. Label it. This is a what if. This is not my present moment. This is something I'm just imagining. And then you want to exhale it out. So literally like a good sigh. You just want to do like a. Now, it won't happen instantly, but over time with these kinds of practices, if you're doing them regularly, it will actually decrease those racing thoughts that are distracting you from work performance or other responsibilities. And really that exhale is that slowing your breath piece, because what happens is when we get anxious, we start to breathe a little bit faster. Our heart rate starts to go a little bit faster, which cues our body that we are in a threat situation and we need to release our stress hormones. And all of a sudden it shoots cortisol through our system. And now our body is in a full-blown stress response when actually we were just sitting on the couch imagining these worst case scenarios. We're not actually in a dangerous situation. So when that happens and you can sense in your body, wow, I'm breathing faster, my heart rate is faster, I'm starting to feel really tense, you want to just slow your breath. And one of the best ways to do that is a good exhale, a good long exhale. And I like to say like as though you're blowing through a straw. So like just exhale it out. And that will help to slow down your heart rate and really slow down that stress response. So at this point, I'm going to wake you back up again. We're going to do another quick poll. We're going to switch over to sleep and how we can support some of the kids in our house. And so for this question, it's kind of a fun fact. What do you think is the average, the best, the ideal number of hours that an adolescent needs in order to get a really good night's sleep? So we'll give you a moment to think through these answers, and then Mayu will post what you all thought, or let us know what you all thought is the best answer. All right, do we have some answers?
Yes. So 40% says 8 to 9 hours, and 60%, so majority, says 9 to 10 hours.
9 to 10 hours. 60% said 9 to 10 hours.
Yes.
That is actually correct. So I realized when I did this, the correct answer is always C. I actually did that myself when I created the slide. But yes, so the correct answer, if you have any adolescents in your home, the ideal amount of sleep that they need is actually 9 to 10 hours per night. One great book, if you're looking for a book to read, if you're raising teenagers, it's called The Teenage Brain by Dr. Jensen. And in that, she actually did a fair bit of research and found the ideal time is 9.25 hours of sleep per night. Now, for most of us, we can't do that because the melatonin doesn't release into our children's brain until later, so they don't actually get tired till later. And then many of us live in school districts where the school starts super early. And so they can't get that time per night, but that is actually what they are supposed to be getting. And what I'm a huge advocate for in terms of, don't get me started on later school start times. So in terms of sleep, one suggestion, one practical strategy, and this might be the one that you pick that you want to work on this week, is really saying, you know what, we all are not on some great sleep schedules. We're not getting the sleep that we need, and we need in our home to establish some sleep routines. So I've put here some of the recommendations from various national organizations. It's pretty consistent across the board in terms of how much sleep our children need and how much sleep we as adults need. And this is really based on brain development. When you're younger, your brain is developing and growing and learning at a much more rapid rate. And then as we get into our 20s, that does significantly slow down and the brain is much more cemented into its permanent state. So as adults, we really only need 7 to 8 hours. So I'd like for you just to kind of think through who is in your home right now, and are they getting these hours of sleep per night? And if they're not, are they sleeping too much, which can often be indicative of some type of depression? If you're an adult and you're sleeping more than 8 hours per night, that might be concerning. Also, are you getting less than that? And often for teenagers, depending again on your school schedule, it might be impossible to get that 9 to 10 hours. But then you may want to encourage your children to take a nap. If you've got teenagers in the house and they're only getting 7 to 8 hours a night, don't think they're lazy if they want to go take a nap, but maybe really encourage them to take a nap, or maybe encourage them to sleep in on a Saturday morning and catch up a little bit. It's not the same, but it's definitely helpful when they are more sleep deprived during the week. But we know, and we focus a lot on this in Meru Health, is that sleep is essential for our brain function. There's a lot that happens while we are sleeping. And we know that individuals who do not get the recommended hours of sleep tend to struggle more with anxiety, depression, burnout, and stress. And so one holistic change that you might want to make in your house during this particular back to school year is to say, you know what, we as a home are going to set up some really good wind down routines an hour before bed. We're going to make our house a little bit more quiet and calm. We're going to set up everybody, and we're all going to really focus on getting good sleep so that we can manage the stress that we're experiencing. Another one that you might want to think about is, how are you doing with nutrition and hydration? For some of you, you may have just started school this week. For others, you might have been in school already for a few weeks. Have you figured out meal planning with this school year? Have you figured out what snacks you're sending to school with your children? Have you figured out the after school, dinner time routines? Or is it kind of still just a bit of a mess? And you're frantically doing a Target curbside pickup, trying to grab some snacks because you keep running out of food at the last minute. I would really encourage you as much as possible to, both for yourself, like I said, making sure you're taking care of yourself so that you are setting a proper tone for the home, making sure you are eating regularly, snacking, eating healthy meals, you're hydrating yourself with water, and you're also choosing some good, nutritious foods. There are some wonderful foods. And again, with our Meru program, we have a whole week where we talk about the food-mood connection and how it really flows together, that the foods that you eat absolutely impact how you will feel. So are you fueling your own brain with nutritious foods? And are you fueling the brains of the people in your home? And would that help with some of those warning signs that we talked about earlier? So maybe this is something you want to think about this week and spend a little bit more attention on in terms of meal planning and snack planning and things of that nature. And then also movement. When we tend to be a bit more sedentary, when we're kind of just, watching episode after episode of Netflix, or we're stuck at our desk and we're working longer hours, we tend to experience more of that anxiety, depression, burnout, and stress. And one of the other ways that you can manage your mood in a holistic kind of way that you can start tomorrow is simply by moving your body. And so here are some recommendations in terms of time commitments. I put the first one because most of us are more into that moderate intensity kind of realm, going for a brisk walk, going for a bike ride, doing some weight training, anything in that more moderate range. What is recommended is if you can do 2.5 hours per week, you are likely to really make some significant improvements in your ability to manage your mood and your functioning. Getting out and doing those types of things, especially if you can get outside, do it in nature, can really help you manage your stress. So maybe this is something as a family you want to make a commitment to. Maybe you want to walk the dog a little bit longer. Maybe you want to do some family bike rides. What is it that might work for your family to increase that moderate intensity and get everybody moving a little bit in order to help everybody feel better? The other one is if you're more of that person where you like the high intensity, maybe you like to go running, maybe you want to be on a basketball league or something that's actually more high intensity, really gets that heart rate going. For that, it would be 1 to 1.5 hours per week. So maybe you want to think about enrolling your child in a sport or something where they could really get their body moving. I love swimming. I think swimming for kids is fantastic. And if you can get a child, whether you feel like they're more on the moderate or the high intensity realm of swimming, it's a great way to get the body moving, get them exhausted, kind of use all their muscles. Those types of things can absolutely help their mental health. And then if you're more on the lower intensity side, you've been thinking maybe about doing some yoga. It would be 2 hours of yoga per week is actually really wonderful for your mental health. And so the recommendation here would actually be 2 1-hour classes. So spending a full hour doing a structured yoga class 2 times per week could be excellent for your mental health. And so maybe you have a teenager in your house and you're like, you know what, you and I are signing up for yoga. We're going to go together. You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to, but we're going to go together twice a week and we're going to do some yoga together to help improve our mental health. That could be a solution that might really work for your family this year. So a quote I really wanted to share with you is from a book called Burnout, and it was written by 2 sisters, Emily and Amelia Nagoski. And I strongly recommend this book if you are looking for some more resources in terms of managing stress. But what they say in their book is that to be well is not to live in a state of perpetual safety and calm, but to move fluidly from a state of adversity, risk, adventure, or excitement, and then back into safety and calm, and then back out again. Because stress in itself is not bad for you. Being stuck in that stress is actually what's bad for you. And I think one of the things we learned through COVID is that we can't stop stress from happening to us, right? Maybe you personally have been through situations where you've been involved in a loved one becoming seriously ill, or you've been surprised by a partner walking out the door. Maybe you've been involved in company layoffs, and stressful situations often come to us when we did nothing wrong. You know, a natural disaster happens and it comes our way. There are times where we have major instances of stress or minor situations of stress, but that is kind of life. It comes and it goes. And if we get stuck in that stress is really when we start to have those warning signs and those symptoms of mental health struggles. And so what we want to learn is some of these holistic strategies and interventions so that we can move fluidly back and forth when those situations of risk, excitement, adventure, or adversity come our way. We can manage it, we can breathe through it, and then we can get out of it again and get back to that place of safety and calm. So as we look through some of the strategies I've mentioned today, again, like I said, I'd love for you to pick one that you really want to focus on this week. If you want to do more, you can go for the extra credit. But really looking over what we've talked about today and thinking through which one of these would really help you change the atmosphere in your home, kind of improve the sense of safety and calm and peace and being mindful and grounded in the present moment. So the first one I had mentioned was practicing gratitude. Kind of changing your mindset, choosing to practice gratitude a bit more in order to improve your mental health and by ripple effect, those of others as well. The second one, again, being very intentional about your communication and your connections, communicating well with your school team, supporting your child that way, as well as connecting intentionally with those in your home and being a little bit more deliberate and intentional about how you are asking them questions and checking in with them. The third one would maybe be increasing your practice of mindfulness. Is this something that you want to start doing more regularly? When those thoughts pop up into your head, really being intentional about how you are letting them go and releasing them. Maybe you want to change the sleep schedules in your house. Maybe that's your homework for this week, or the nutrition and hydration habits, being very intentional about that. Movement. Does your family just need to move a bit more? And is that what you want to focus on this week? And then, of course, you know, if you feel like you're a little bit beyond some of these holistic strategies and you're more concerned, I would obviously encourage you to seek out some professional help. through your insurance provider or through your local network, finding somebody that you can meet with. But making sure that you get someone to walk alongside you and even help you to kind of implement some of these changes. On that line, I do want to mention, obviously I'm really proud of working with Meru Health. We are a 12-week app-based treatment program. And as I mentioned, we really tend to focus on some of the strategies that I've mentioned today. So we have a lot of attention focused on really supporting you in practicing mindfulness, practicing some breath work. We have a whole week focused on sleep science and nutritional psychiatry. And so if you feel like some of these strategies I mentioned, you can't really do on your own and you feel like you need a little bit more support, I'd really encourage you to check out meruhealth.com and get some more information that possibly we might be a provider that could support you during this season. So I'm going to move it over to a Q&A right now. And so if you have any questions, if you've already posted them in the Q&A box, you can click that icon and enter any questions now, or Maya will be looking through some of the ones that have already been entered. And yeah, I'd be happy to stay on the call for a few more minutes and answer any questions that you might have.
Beautiful. Thank you, Trish. So we have one question that has come through, and I also recommend to take advantage of Trish's knowledge while she is here. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to ask them right now. But this question is, do you have any recommended free time activities for the whole family to do together to recharge everyone's batteries?
So free time activities to recharge your batteries, is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think anything that involves movement and anything that involves in nature kind of really increases your reward for your efforts. So, anything you can, like scavenger hunts. We used to do geocaching. You can do those Pokemon Go hunts, anything you can do out in nature. Around where I live in the suburbs of Chicago, we have some wonderful forest preserves, and just putting the kids on a bike and going out there for a little while can be really beneficial. The fresh air, the oxygen, the nature really does tend to really recharge batteries. And then anything like, I will tell you, so I don't know if you can tell, but I'm like a 5'2" white girl. And all of my kids are like tall and into basketball. And I'm like a Canadian, like I grew up with hockey. And so I just got involved in basketball because I knew that that would really recharge their batteries. And so we spent the money, we put the basketball hoop in the driveway. I downloaded some apps on my phone about like different drills that you could do with basketball. And I would get out there on the driveway and I would be rebounding basketballs for them and just kind of engaging with them. Really, if you can figure out a little thing that your children are interested in, even if you're not interested in it, you just got to like let down your insecurities and just kind of go for it. It's the same thing with swimming. Like you might feel like you've got more of a middle-aged body and you're not super excited to be in a swimsuit, but you know what? Just put on the swimsuit and go swimming with your kids. Swimming is a great activity to get everybody's energy recharged. It's just, you can be playful, you can be fun. You just kind of need to let that stuff kind of go. So I would say anything physically active, especially if you can get outdoors, and even better if you can actually get really into nature somewhere. If you live in a more urban setting, to kind of get yourself into nature can be really helpful. There's also some research that's coming out a lot about being near water. So if you can get any kind of an activity, even like fishing or going for walks near water, that can be very restoring for a lot of people. I know I personally really enjoy that. So those types of things can be, I think, a great way to do that.
Yes, sounds wonderful. And there are these research about forest bathing as well that has been proven to be like very, very useful for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. If anybody's interested, just Google forest bathing, like you're taking a bath in a forest. And there's a lot of research just about what happens to you physically when you spend a significant amount of time just surrounding yourself in nature in that way.
Yeah. Well, if there are no more questions, I would like to thank Trish for your time and for this beautiful presentation. It was very informative. And don't worry, everyone, if you didn't catch everything in the presentation, you will receive the recording, so you can go back to all these tips and tricks that Trish shared. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you next time.